Hello there, welcome back to the booth here at Mythic Championship 2 from London. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe, joined by Paul Cheon, and it is our pleasure to bring you coverage of the limited portion here on day number 1. We're into round number 3, where we've got, well, from our main feature pod, the two players that we've been seeing do the most winning here, and that is Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa from Brazil. He plays for Team Channel Fireball. With that 2-0, this is the finals of the pod. You sit down with 8 other players, and only 2 players make it to the finals, and of course only one emerges with that 3-0 to start off your Mythic Championship correctly. On the other side of the battlefield is Joe Soh from Malaysia on 2-0 as well. Joe is playing a blue-black deck with a little bit of white in there on a splash. On the other side of the battlefield, we see straight green-white here from Paulo, and boy, his deck looks strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And not a huge surprise that we see Paulo here at 2-0, as you know, he's got a ton of great.
Ooh, look at this giant growth.
Oh my, wow.
Just doing huge work.
And normally Divine Arrow is really able to
a lot
kill
of damage.
Creatures. Not only that, even most combat tricks wouldn't have been able to save it, but Giant Growth getting the job done here.
Old school, baby, all the way from Alpha, and we're still here in War of the Spark with Giant Growth. It used to be a big mouse, now it looks like it's a big wolf. But.
Yeah, that is, I believe, a giant Mowu.
Ah, You're right. I see the collar, the telltale collar.
Joe with all 3 colors of mana this time around. I think we haven't really seen him with white mana in any of the previous games. But very powerful deck. His blue common specifically, very strong with 4 copies of Aven Eternal along with 2 copies of Tamiyo's Epiphany.
Yeah, we see that exact curve here, Paul, and we've seen it time and time again from Joe. It's a little bit incongruous, right? You play this sort of aggressive, evasive creature that makes another body, and then you're like, oh, next turn I'll just draw a bunch of cards. But
right.
It works. It is a sort of just on a raw power level basis, it gets the job done.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great thing about Aven Eternal. Sure, you know, you get the evasion, you get the 1/1, but ultimately, at the end of the day, in blue, you're getting a 3-mana card that gives you 3 power and 3 toughness worth of stats, which is not something you typically get out of a blue card.
No.
So, you know, you can even use those creatures defensively so that you can actually set up your Tamiyo's Epiphany and take over the late game.
Interestingly, Joe is going to pump the brakes a little bit on any attacking here. He'd like to leave back his Aven so that if he needs to, he can block that makeshift battalion before it can get going.
Right.
That is a Crunch Wrangler.
And a Paradise Druid.
That's
so
right.
All the mana here, and also now Paulo has the potential to attack with 3 creatures to get that +1/+1 counter on the battalion.
I like the curve out here. That was 2 mana spell from Joe. It didn't end up working, but still a 2 mana spell from Joe into a 3 and then a 4. And then on this turn here, we've got Paulo playing 2 2-drops here with his 4 mana available. So the player's being very mana efficient early and really kind of giving us a look at what it's going to look like when these decks play out.
I feel like Paulo's had turn 1 Larun Enforcer every single game we've seen him so far.
He really has. Yeah, he only has 1, right?
Right.
Yeah. So playing correctly, I guess, is how he would call it.
And Joe playing
Elite Guard Mage. That's on the splash, and boy, it looks good here. The 2/3 flyer with a huge upside for entering the battlefield.
Yeah, fantastic raid, and a card worthy of a splash. I mean, you're getting a nice evasive creature that kind of not only gains you some of that life, but also just replaces itself.
Okay, here's one of the 2 copies of Zhang here that Paulo has.
All right.
Where did you put the counter? On the Wrangler?
He put it on the Crunch Wrangler. Now, this is kind of inviting Joe to attack with his 2 flyers to get the Jiang Yangu off the battlefield, but Paulo actually has not only the ability to tap one of the flyers, he does have a Gideon's Triumph as well in hand.
Interesting. And remember, that Crunch Wrangler can now tap for any color of mana.
Right. So
Jiang Yangu is a very tricky card. It's going to take people, I think, a little while to get used to.
So will Joe fire off the attack here?
Lazotep Reaver's the play so far. That does get 2/2 going on his army token. Is that enough?
Well, now Joe can attack with the army token and pressure Jiang Yangu, and Paulo might actually choose to trade with the battalion or something.
Seems fine.
But he will be tapping down one of the flyers here. And again, Gideon's Triumph in Paulo's hand.
And he has very deceptively 2 mana available somehow, even though all of his lands are tapped in.
Here we go.
There it is. Gideon's Triumph to not only protect his Planeswalker, but get that flyer off the battlefield. That's a nice little play there from Paulo. Well set up.
Yeah, very strong sequencing from from Paulo. And Paulo, with that Jiang in play, really wants to find a proliferate effect, as it synergizes extremely well with Jiang.
Yeah, he does have multiple ways to proliferate in his deck, though he doesn't have a ton. It's not like every other card has it, but he has 4 or 5 that do it. So it won't be particularly difficult if he can find it to make this board state massive.
Yeah, he's got a couple of Huatley's Raptors, a Bloom Hulk.
Yep.
So those are some, and of course, one of the best ones, Evolution Sage.
That's right.
Allowing you to proliferate every time you play a land.
And we've seen that 1-2 punch because, you know, you can play it that turn, then play the land that turn, and it's really difficult to interact with. You're basically going to get that proliferate either way.
Right.
And then if it sticks around, it gets really dumb. That's Rising Populace now for Paulo. Another card that can pick up +1/+1 counters, especially if Paulo decides to get frisky here, but he's not going to. He's growing the battalion, probably just so that it can keep pace with a potential army token getting bigger and bigger.
Right. Joe still with a pair of very powerful spells here with Aven Eternal and Prison Realm.
He also can deploy both of those this turn if he'd like. He says, I'd like to go to combat. That's going to prompt Paulo to use his Law Rune Enforcer.
And Joe might look to make an attack with the Herald here and attack the Planeswalker, Jiang. And if a trade does happen, Joe will be able to make a 4/4 army token. Nope. Chooses to not go for it because he now has 2 flyers on the battlefield. So the Law Rune Enforcer can only deal with one of the flyers on the battlefield, so Joe can't finish off the Jiang.
Or at least force Paulo just to use it up there, right?
Paulo, this is you know, as good a turn as any to find one of those proliferate cards.
Seriously, it would be absurd. Interesting decision, of course, with Jiang on 1 loyalty. Would you rather proliferate a counter onto it and then throw a counter around, or get as many counters on your creatures first?
Right.
Longer term, it's better to keep the Planeswalker around, but in the short term, you could cash in Jiang and then proliferate it onto the creature and kind of get going.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where if you know for sure, like if you have no way to protect the Jiang, you should just put a +1/+1 counter probably on one of your creatures. It's better than, you know, preserving 2 points of life.
Right.
But he will now use the static ability of Jiang, which is anytime you have a counter on one of your creatures, you can tap that creature to produce any color of mana. And so he can empty out his hand and then finally use Jiang's ability and put a counter on another one of his creatures.
Yeah, that's a Challenger Troll there from Paulo.
And keep in mind, Rising Populace gets a counter because it gets a +1/+1 counter when a creature or Planeswalker dies. And Paulo still does have the mana to tap with the Law Rune Enforcer because he has that Paradise Druid on the battlefield.
Also taking advantage of the static ability. Once again, there's a lot of those in this set from Challenger Troll.
Right.
And because now the makeshift battalion, you know, has 5 power, can only be single blocked.
Yeah, and that is huge. It being a 5/4 means there is no creature that Joe has on the battlefield that can effectively get rid of that battalion.
And of course, the Challenger Troll itself is a 6/5. That'll be true of that next turn as well. So, okay, you know,
yeah, and
he's starting to work with things here.
He did have that tough pick earlier with that Challenger Troll. He could have taken a Band Together, which is a very strong removal effect. But, you know, Challenger Troll showing why it's so powerful.
Yeah, and Paulo, of course, with this Law Rune Enforcer and really just a ton of mana available, you know, thanks to the creatures he's got there, the Paradise Druid. he can continually activate it and really keep the board clear. And things are starting to get pretty sketchy here for Joe Soh. He is facing down a very big board state and doesn't really have a lot of ways to interact at the moment.
He did he not put a counter on Crunch Wrangler?
It has
well,
one.
it had one from Jiang Yangu, right? I thought it got a counter from Jiang.
It should have gotten one from the Challenger Troll, though. I don't actually remember if he did it.
Yeah, because whenever you play a creature with power 4 or greater, you put a counter on Crunch Wrangler. And then he did play the Troll last turn, right?
Mm-hmm, he did.
Yeah.
Now he's got a Thundering Ceratok. He does remember this time to put a counter on the Wrangler. Oh, but look at this. Totally lost. That will allow blocks to happen in multiples if Joe would like.
Right. Bounce Spell is highly effective against all the Proliferate and all the +1/+1 counters. And this is big. I mean, imagine if that Crunch Wrangler was a 5/4. It would have completely changed these blocks.
That's going to allow for a 1-for-1 trade now. All right, well, this is a big turn here for this opening game. A lot of material being traded off between our two players.
But the Rising Populace continuing to grow here.
Rising indeed.
Now a 5/5, 3-mana 5/5 common. That's pretty strong.
That is really good. And in fact, it looks like it might be good enough to put in the old Prison Realm here. Let's see if he's got another idea for it, though. No, he's not going to kill it. He's going to take out the Thundering Ceratok. It's just a 4/5. So Joe must have something in mind for the Rising Populace at some point here.
Probably just very concerned about the trample on the Ceratok, whereas the Rising Populace, you can chump a little more here and there.
Good turn, though, for Joe Soh, though. It does leave him, I believe, empty-handed. Yeah, he's out of gas. But he added an Aven Eternal to the board as well. So Paulo redrew the Challenger Troll. Thanks to Totally Lost. He's going to play it. And once again, the Rising Populace is a chump block or take the damage type scenario. And there's a land off the top of the library for Joe. And you got to like the clock on Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa's side of the board. If this is what this game has settled into, things are looking good for Paulo. Of course, one of the problems with Totally Lost is it does not completely deal with the threat. It will come back.
Right.
It does effectively trade a card for a card, but sometimes, you know, at that point, Paulo's like, well, you know what, I'd like to draw a Challenger Troll. So,
yeah, Challenger Troll, just a great creature. One of the big payoffs for the kind of the red-green power 4 matters decks. But, you know, on rate, it's just so good that you're just going to put it in any green deck you have. Oh.
And now we're going to get aggressive here. Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tap down your best remaining blocker and send into the red zone. He's looking to close out game number 1 as quickly as possible. He knows that every draw step from Joe Soh is bad for Paulo, so he's going to press his advantage as hard as possible now that Joe is low on cards and resources.
Yeah, that was a lethal attack there for Paulo if Joe chose not to block.
So great stuff from Paulo, really showing how to close out a game here and pressure Joe. And in fact, he's pressured him enough to take this one down. So that is Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa up a game. His deck is fantastic. We got a chance to watch him draft it, and will we see him get the 3-0 here early on? We'll find out shortly. We'll be back right after these messages.
I'm here with Josh Utter-Layton, and we are going to crack a pack of War of the Spark and see what you're going to take here first.
This is my first pack of War of the Spark.
I know, it's so exciting.
Yeah. All right, so we have a bunch of 2-mana 2/2s and 3-mana 3/2s. Not so good so far. All right, there's a card I'd be happy to take. There's a card I'm very happy to take. So Chandra's Pyrohelix is the best of the commons so far. Death Sprout is an awesome card. I would be very happy selecting that. Arlen, Voice of the Pack. Not bad. And Roll Reversal is the rare. Okay, so it's very clear that these 3 cards are the best in the pack. Roll Reversal, Arlen, and Death Sprout.
Tough decision here, Josh.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure I've actually never played with Arlen, so I have no idea how good she is.
Well, you've got a couple more drafts to get in before the Mythic Championship starts.
Yeah. Think I'm going to take the Death Sprout out of this pack.
Why do you want to take that card?
It's a very powerful card. It's just a removal spell. It can answer anything. It's very good in like a 5-color green style deck where you're trying to kind of ramp out into a bunch of expensive bombs in a variety of colors. It's just the perfect card for that deck. What that deck wants is like being able to cast its bombs and have removal. And this does 2 of those things, which is definitely extraordinary. So,
Are you worried at all about the black-green color commitment early on?
I mean, yes, in that like certainly there's taking a gold card is worse than a monocolor card, but I think it's just enough better that it's worth like going out of your way to try to do that.
All right, Death Sprout from Josh Utter-Layton here in our Pack 1 Pick 1 for War of the Spark.
And welcome back to the feature match area here at Mythic Championship 2 from London. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Cheon. We got a little live look in here. We got to see one of the goats earlier. Well, here's another one. We're goat herding here in the feature match area. There is Kai Bude from Germany. That human being has won 7 Mythic Championships.
Yeah, kind of ridiculous.
Like, took the trophy home 7 times.
Yeah. His conversion rate in top 8s is just completely bonkers.
Oh, he's the closer.
I don't actually remember. BDM, BDM might know, but it is ridiculous. I mean, he was kind of one of my heroes growing up. Just like getting into the competitive Magic scene, where he was just completely dominant. I was like, there's just no way this guy's going to top 8 another one, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, he top 8 it, but he's not going to win again, right? And he just kept winning, event after event. And I was just like, like obviously everybody just kind of wanted to be Kai.
Yes.
Like in his peak, he was just completely unstoppable.
The highest peak of any Magic player
Absolutely.
ever, for sure, yeah. And they called him the German Juggernaut.
Oh, yeah.
Now, sitting across from him, though, no slouch. That's Matt Costa, who we haven't seen at all the Mythic Championships of late, but it's great to see him out here in London battling it out against Kai. And he's even finds himself up a game. Kai simply passing the turn back once again. A couple of Pollenbright Druids, it looks like, on the battlefield for him.
Yeah, it looks like Matt's stabilizing here. He's got a Jace, Wielder of Mysteries in play.
And just looking to try to maybe get a little alternate win here. Is he going to do it?
Well, he's targeting himself with the mill ability.
Oh, I like it.
Jace's Plus can, of course, target any player and put the top 2 cards of any player's library in their graveyard. And then, of course, you will draw a card, as many of the Jaces do.
I mean, it is Jace, right?
Yeah.
He's got to stick to his primary game plan.
That's his brand, Mm-hmm. He draws cards, maybe bounces things sometimes.
It's also my brand, interestingly.
You're in good company.
Yeah, he does better.
Yeah.
Of course, Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, has a static ability like all the Planeswalkers here. If you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead.
Kai going for Heartfire for the win. Matt Costa sitting at 4 life.
Oh, Soren's Thirst, one of your creatures in response. That's just a gain 2.
Oh, so big. So Matt Costa now at 2 life.
Wow.
So close.
That was Kai trying to win the game on the spot.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the great benefits to Heartfire is that it can go upstairs, as we say. You can target players with it.
Wow.
That was close. But it ends up being really bad for Kai there, right? I mean, he ends up wasting one of his best removal spells. And Matt is still at a very critical, not 0. In this case, it's 2.
Yeah, Matt just really wants to. I mean, Kai, of course, because he is playing with Mountains in his deck, there probably are a few ways
Yes.
for you to kind of get through that last couple points of damage. We call it reach, some burn spells. So if he has another Heartfire or maybe even a Turret Ogre, you could try to.
Which he has on the battlefield one
right?
already, which also has reach.
What literal reach?
It's reach with reach.
Yeah.
That's cute. Saheeli's Silverwing, by the way, is the card that Matt cast last, and you saw Kai lift the top card of his library to show it to him because it just has a very kind of benign ability when it enters the battlefield. You look at the top card of target opponent's library.
And as you can see, there are 2 counters on a creature on the battlefield. That is Thunder Drake. And in the last turn, Matt Costa played a Soren's Durst and the Glider, the Silverwing, sorry, and put that second counter. So at some point, Matt Costa does want to end the game. He can do it with that Jace, Wielded Mysteries in play. But that Turret Ogre, it's a 6/5. So it's doing a really good job of just kind of stymieing Matt's offense.
I mean, you'd think so, but what offense?
Well, I mean,
He might just win with this Jace. Look at his library. It is
He definitely
dwindling
could.
quickly.
He's getting
1, 2, 3,
close.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He's got 11 cards left in his library, Paul. If he needs to draw a card and he can't, if he's got Jace out, it's GG. And Jace is getting very close here to going ultimate as well.
He is. Jace's ultimate is 8. You get to draw 7 cards. Then if your library has no cards in it, you win the game. So he had 11 there, so he still needs to tick it up a couple more times before ultimately winning with the ultimate.
Yes. Indeed, indeed. We're going to pop over to our main match in a second here, but I have to see if Matt Costa can pull the alternate win con here.
Matt's
with
deck
Jace.
looks amazing. I saw Commence the Endgame
I did too.
in hand, too. One of the better rares in the format as well. So he's got Jace, Commence the Endgame, lots of removal. That's a Bolus's Scorn as well in hand.
It's kind of funny.
Jeez.
It's kind of funny because I think if you ask Kai, he would agree that the end game has commenced, well, before we got here, perhaps. Though that being said, Kai likely has outs to kill Matt. This one is not over yet, and Matt needs to be careful to not open himself up to the burn spell. He needs to win as quickly as he possibly can. Every card off the top of the library dangerous here for Matt Costa.
Right, but keep in mind, Matt Costa does have a Spark Reaper in play, it looks like.
And by the way, commence the end game. That gets him closer, right? It's not just the card. It's not just the
You
amass.
just want to deck yourself to ultimate with
yes. Hey, look at this.
Here
Kai
it
is like,
is.
how many? Okay. So it was 11. That's 9 plus the draw step. So 8. So we are right there.
Time
1,
to
2,
count.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7
That's
left.
it.
Ultimate. And Kai says, wait a minute, what does that do again? Draw 7 cards. Then if your library has no cards in it, you win the game. And Matt Costa with the
Jace
alternate win
ultimate.
con says,
Get him.
welcome back, Kai Bude. And picks up the win there. All right, that means that we're going to get back to action here on our main table. Joe Soh versus Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa. And it looks like they're all set to go. This is the finals quote of this opening pod. This had to be the toughest pod in the field. Multiple MPL members, Hall of Famers in this pod. So this one really tough to escape with the 3-0. But right now, well, the best player in the pod looks like he is on the verge here of doing so. He's got the turn 2 Huatley's Raptor. Now, you can play it later and get that proliferate, but right now, it's still fine. It's a 2-3.
2 mana, 2/3 with
as well.
Vigilance. So just a very solid creature, even on turn 2 without counters. And Joe stuck on 2 lands here. Needs to find a third counter here for that army token to attack through the Huatley's Raptor. So despite Joe having multiple 2s, he actually can't attack. And look at Paul. He's like, I don't even need counters.
No.
Who needs to proliferate? 2 mana, 2/3, 4 mana, 4/4?
Just beef it up.
Just happy with those.
So let's see if this Bloomhold can start getting something going.
Paul curving out. Got a couple lands in hand, but so Joe, if you can string together some lands, maybe you can muster up a good offense here. And here we go. No attack.
But that army token is growing. It is already up to 3/3. Each of the creatures on the battlefield having put their contribution.
Now the question here is Joe going to just put a bunch of creatures in front of that Bloomhulk and hope for the best? Oh, he does have, but look at Joe's hand. It is pretty stacked. If he draws a Plains, that will unlock Prison Realm. If he draws an island, he will be able to cast Enter the God Eternals, which would be huge. And Paulo's tapped out this turn. Oh, and he finds the island. He finds the island for Enter the God Eternals. He's going to use that, target the Bloomhulk, the Sunblade Angel,
Yeah, that seems like the best target possible here. Knock that thing out of the sky. Get a 7/7.
Yeah, gain 4
Army.
also.
Yeah,
I mean, it
back up
does it
to
all.
20. Wow, what a
big
swing
attack.
for Joe Soh. Awesome stuff from him, really leveraging the power of that rare.
And Paulo desperately needs to find an answer to this 7/7 zombie army token.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of ends up being eggs basket 1 here, right?
Right.
Like, there's not a lot. Like, if he does find the answer for it, it's a big rebuild here for Joe. But if he doesn't,
Right.
yikes. Makeshift Battalion's definitely not it. And
Right.
Rising Populace, also not it.
Paulo going for the racing strategy here, just
Yeah.
littering the board with creatures here. Probably going to be doing some chump blocking. What do we got here?
He does have 7 power, although.
Oh my
oh my
goodness.
God. Yeah. That is going to end the game. That
Eternal
actually,
Skylord.
The Skylord actually gives Joe Soh's his army token 2 additional counters and flying.
Yeah, that's big. That is huge. And you know, in a lot of the other games, Joe's just kind of put this random token onto the battlefield, and it just continuously gets chump blocked. But these are the payoff cards, right? The cards that give you flying, death touch, menace.
Yep.
That is the reason why you want to grow your armies large.
Yeah, sick curve there. Every single card he played had a mass. We're going to be back with more right after this.
So hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all, but in the end, it doesn't even matter.
And welcome back here to coverage of Mythic Championship 2 in London. Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Chian. I got some updates for you while the players get ready for their next game. On our side tables, we had Jean-Emmanuel Duprat playing against Gregors Kowalski, so a little bit of a battle there. Both players coming in at 2-0. They've split a game apiece, so they're playing in Game 3 as we speak. And then, as we saw before, just as a quick update, you can see that they have vacated the premises. But Matt Costa defeated Kai Bude, and hopefully you were able to see that. That was 2-0 for the match that we saw, and that was Chase ultimating and also hitting the alternate win con. So in true style from Matt Costa.
Oh yeah, lots of style points. That was an end step, commence the end game. Not to kill Kai with a large amass zombie token or anything. It was to make sure his deck was small enough so that he could ultimate Jace for the win.
Also, I'm telling you, style points just flowing for Costa because he did exactly that.
Right.
He commenced the end game indeed. And look at this start here from Paulo. He's got the Paradise Druid to kick things off on turn 2. That means that on turn 3 he can play 2 2-drops. He's got a Crunch Wrangler, which is actually the name of that card, and a War Screecher.
Yeah, and Joe actually being slightly punished here for having a more ambitious mana base, playing the 3 colors, and as you can see, Swamp Plains, and a handful of some blue cards. So might be a little bit difficult. Look, as you can see here, he does have the splash card into Divine Arrow, but he's got the 2 copies of the Aven Eternal that he can't cast because of that Plains on the battlefield. Nahiri making it so that Paulo's creatures have first strike, but Paulo opting to play defensively here and not attack. Wants to keep the War Screecher back to block, but the 2/1s also don't have profitable attacks because Joe can just choose to double block them and trade 1-for-1. But at the same time, whenever your opponent plays a Nahiri, you're not really looking to get in for some for kind of chip damage, although it looks like Joe wants to get Nahiri low.
Maybe he has the finisher.
Yep, Vraska's finisher, definitely a card that Joe can have. We also know about the Divine Arrow, but I think Paulo's very happy if Joe just fires off a Divine Arrow on one of these smaller creatures.
For sure. But finisher finishing off Nahiri is a thing, right?
Yeah.
And
there it is. Oh.
Yeah, so finisher to kill Nahiri, so not too bad. A little bit of material gets traded off for Joe, but Paulo's like, all right, I guess my Planeswalker's dead.
Yeah, I wonder if Paulo's thinking, oh, right, Vraska's finisher, maybe I should have just blocked both of the creatures.
Mm-hmm. This is tough. Remember, we are super early. You know, we've got a couple of those Crack-A-Packs in between rounds, and, you know, we saw one with Josh Utter late, and he was like, this is my first time opening up a War of the Spark Booster. You know, it's just, we are so early in the format. It is not the way that things normally go at the Mythic Championship level. Normally, they've had the set in their hands for, you know, a good couple of weeks at least to really understand what's going on with the limited format and get some repetitions in. But that is simply not the case here. Many times, this is the first time the players are holding the actual cards in their hand.
Right, and now Joe finally finds an island to kind of unlock his hand and play the blue spells that he has, the Aven Eternals.
He's going to offer up a trade here. The Crunch Wrangler or the Druid could jump in front and trade off for Vraska's finisher, though it looks like Paulo is going to use, as we say, he's going to use his life total as a resource. He's going to soak up 3 damage to keep those creatures on board.
And Paulo does have a Pledge of Unity here in hand.
Oh, hello. Now you can see why he wanted to keep the creatures that he already had on the battlefield. Every single one of them gets a +1/+1 counter, and hey, he'll throw in a little bit of life here as well.
So now he's in a nice position here. He does have the mana sink effect of the War Screecher if he wants to. Or if he draws a Proliferate card, it would be a huge top deck.
Instead, it is time to beat down. He's going to tap down the only good blocker, leaving just the 1/2 Lazotep Reaver behind and send in with the team. He's just going to go ahead and play the land out of his hand as well so that he can, you know, be flexible with his mana on the War Screecher or the La Rune Enforcer.
Yeah, and absolutely. And Paulo does need to be aggressive here because, I mean, look at Joe. He's sitting with 5 cards in hand, so he wants to end this game as quickly as possible and put in as much pressure. So I don't think we're going to see an attack here from Joe anymore, trying to kind of stabilize here because he's up so many cards on Paulo.
Interesting. Joe's going to kind of cycle that Guild Globe there. I actually thought this was going to be a turn where he wanted to use maybe an Aven Eternal plus the Divine Arrow, something like that. But He wanted to continue to just be mana efficient here, so he's going to cast the Aven now and pass, but the shields are well and truly down for him. I guess he figures that the board is good enough for blocks now that he didn't attack with the finisher, so it's going to be back as well as the 3-2 Herald.
So Paulo now figuring out what the good attacks are. I mean, Joe does have the ground in pretty reasonable shape here, right? Because he does have Vraska's finisher. He's got Herald of the Dreadhorde as well in play. So Paulo's ground creatures can't really attack, so he's just getting in an attack with the War Screecher. And has the makeshift battalion in play, along with now the activation for the Larun Enforcer.
I thought you were being mean and called it the worst creature. I was like,
no.
Paul.
The two War Screechers, totally fine.
Oh, totally fine, huh? Poor War Screecher. Although it did get 3 stars, so you're kind of right.
Yeah, it's basically totally fine.
That means totally fine.
Right. It might be totally lost soon. Joe Soh's got one of those in his hand.
All right, well, we'll see how Joe wants to approach this. This is game number 3, and this is to win our feature pod, a very, very tough pod of 8 players. And, of course, coming out of this first draft with 3 victories already, knowing what you're playing, we're going to be transitioning to Modern after this round is over, is a fantastic place to be here at the Mythic Championship level. And once again, Joe Soh really just leveraging these Aven Eternals. He's got 4 of them in his deck, 2 of them on the battlefield, and it's just tough for Paulo to keep up.
Paulo really needs, like, look at how, I mean, Joe sure has done a good job of kind of stabilizing the board, but if at any point Paulo just draws like a proliferate creature, that completely kind of changes all the math. So,
it does.
You know, Paulo has a lot of draws here that would be very, very strong for him.
Yeah, Bloom Hulk, Huatley's Raptor would both be great.
Absolutely. And another thing, I mean, we saw him play out that land because of the War Screecher, but he might also, if he draws lands moving forward, choose to keep them in hand because he has Evolution Sage in his deck.
That's right. Hey, he found Zhang Yanggu here.
Okay.
Which is fine. That will allow him to keep on attacking here, it looks like, with the War Screecher.
And Paulo actually choosing to attack here, and he will lose the Jiang Yanggu to
that's kind of interesting.
An attack from one of the Aven Eternals. But however, if he does that, Joe will have 2 creatures tapped. And I think Paulo is basically saying, hey, you know, you want to do this, go ahead. I can attack back for a lot.
That's right.
Yeah.
He's almost daring Joe Soh to attack and force this issue here with the Zhang Yanggu. And this is a tough position here for Joe because he doesn't want to do that, but also if he leaves Jiang on the battlefield, well, he'll just keep getting value from it and keep adding more counters to Paulo's creatures. Yeah, this one is very, very close right now.
Given that Paulo knows that the Jiang Yanggu is going to die no matter what, he might just actually not tap one of the flyers because he might just be incentivized to block, for example, tap Herald of the Dreadhorde instead because it is a better blocker.
And Joe has passed the turn back. So on the end step here, the Larun Enforcer is going to start working on the ground game, tapping down one of the 3/2s, this time a Herald. And is Paulo, does he have a good attack if he taps down the Vraska's finisher and then sends in a bunch of stuff? It's a fairly muddled board, but what is it? A 1/2, a 2/1, a 3/2, a 2/2, and a 2/2. So he can tap down any one of those. The biggest is the Vraska's finisher. And that would leave Joe with not a whole lot, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 power total.
Yeah, and it is one of the best opportunities to kind of get that counter on the makeshift battalion as well. But Joe, it does have 3 cards in hand and just passed
with
6 mana up.
Super suspicious, isn't it?
Right. So it might be one of those situations where Paulo's like, you have so much. I kind of want to see what you're working with here. Maybe I'm just going to go ahead and attack with my 3/5 War Screecher.
And like, what happens here if the game just continues? Right now, Paulo's a little bit ahead, right? That War Screecher is able to attack in the air, even if the other Aven was there. And so that means that the edge is slightly to Paulo, especially given that he has a huge life total cushion where Joe would really have a hard time killing him in one shot or anything weird like that. So I think unless Paulo really feels like he can work through some type of instant speed interactive creature spell from Joe, he will just continue to chip in with the War Screecher.
And this turn, by the way, is like turns like this where it's super hard to actually parse what's happening. and figuring out board states is kind of what separates the good players to the great players.
Yep.
Because when I'm in this spot, I'm just like, I don't know, I'm just going to make the safe attack,
Yes.
right? But Paulo thinking through all the angles and just making sure that, ultimately he ended up just attacking with the flyer, but he took his time because he was really running the numbers and making sure that, he didn't actually have just made sure it was certain that he didn't have a great attack there.
That's right. Here's Tamio's Epiphany now for Joe Soh. So perhaps inching his way back to not only being even, he's kind of already done that, but to getting ahead in this game because it was totally lost to reset that War Screecher and really not what Paulo wants to draw off the top of the library.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the totally lost doing a lot of work here because Joe feels safe for at least one turn. There's not going to be proliferate shenanigans happening next turn because of the War Screecher on top. And then now he has the Divine Arrow in hand. He's got a much bigger board than Paulo. And there's an elite guard mage that he found off that Tamio's Epiphany, kind of cushioning his life total.
Gideon's Triumph there from Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa does take care of one of the Avens. And now we're going to see Joe Soh kind of make an interesting play here because Mina's Transmutation is going to take away the ability of that Law Rune Enforcer, though it's still a 2-2 on the battlefield.
Yeah. So can no longer tap down creatures.
And look at Joe. He says, well, I turned the corner. I'm going to start hitting you with this Aven.
Yeah, interesting because Paulo does have a War Screecher in play.
Right.
Paulo thinking, okay, can I just take it here? You do have a bunch of cards, and you did just play a Tamio's Epiphany, so you probably have something.
He took it.
Yep.
And it's because he had a replacement. So that was a relatively free attack there from Joe. So the Elite Guard Mage hitting the battlefield and kind of serving that same role. And boy, that's a nice one from Joe. That buffers his life total back up to 9, gives him another flying threat, and draws him a card. That was kind of just what the doctor ordered.
Right, but that was still a very nice attack from Joe, too, right? Because he got in 2 free points of damage.
Super chippy. I love it.
Exactly, because sure, if Paulo just snaps off the block there, nothing happens. But
right.
with that attack, Joe got in for and that might prove to be very relevant at the end of this game.
Yeah, we call that a free roll, at least from Joe's perspective, where he felt like there was no downside to the attack, but only upside. Even if it wasn't huge, it's for free.
Wait, this is interesting.
Zhang Yangu number 2 hits the battlefield for Paulo, but he's gone.
Okay.
Yeah, but that is a little weird, right? Paulo
Yeah.
could have blocked with the War Screecher.
And then he had the mana because of Zhang Yangu's ability to actually pump the War Screecher, too, if he wanted to. Maybe he's trying to play around Divine Arrow?
Yeah, and it was big enough already, right, to just eat up the Aven, and then he could have even used it on the...
Right.
Huh.
So he must have sniffed something out. He must be thinking, okay, Joe must have something here for my War Screecher, so I'm going to choose not to block.
Yeah.
Because, the War Screecher is pretty important here, as it does...
Which one?
They're worse than multiples, but...
they are indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps Paulo trying to prioritize using the War Screecher on offense rather than on defense.
And Joe definitely just clawing back here, just pulling further and further ahead in cards with another Tamio's Epiphany.
Another Tamio's Epiphany. How is Paulo supposed to keep up with this? He does not have access to the type of cards that can smooth out his draws and give him card advantage later. And now he just has to really hope he finds some of his most powerful stuff.
Absolutely. He needs to
Tolsimir or something.
Yeah, Tolsimir or string together multiple proliferate cards in a row.
That's right.
To kind of go over the top. But it's going to be extremely difficult because Joe now can just put any land he sees on top to the bottom and draw all spells for the rest of the game.
Yeah,
or for the rest of the next few turns.
Been really impressed by Joe Soh every time we've seen him on camera, and he could be on the verge of emerging from that really nasty pod.
Yep.
And being the only 3-0 to come out of it. What an accomplishment if he's able to do so.
Oh, look at this.
Enter the God Eternal, so send that one Screecher, and this is just Joe taking firm control of this game at this point. Wow.
And at this point,
super impressive.
Yeah, at this point, look at him. He's all the way back up to 15 life, and now he can just start getting in.
And by the way, that army
scared.
token
6/6
gotten completely out of hand at some point. Paulo now will block with War Screecher just to soak up the 2 damage, but this is the smaller one since the other one's what got killed by Enter the God Eternals.
Right.
Boy, Enter the God Eternals. I mean, you only have to read it once to realize that it's great, but seeing it in action here, holy smokes, that card is insane. It's like a laundry list of awesome stuff for you.
Right, for sure. I mean, just even a 5-mana spell that would deal 4 and gain you 4 is something that you're pretty happy playing in your deck. But how about just an extra 4/4 body on top of that?
Yeah. I don't know what to make of the mill for 4.
I think the mill for 4 is to make the card blue. Because otherwise this would be kind of a mono black card.
I see.
Right? So, you have to put some amount of text in the cards to make it so that it feels gold.
But
like, has some
just from my perspective, I'm like, well, do I care about that? And the answer is not particular. I mean, maybe it comes up occasionally.
But it
it's
could
not
also,
a downside or an upside.
It could also potentially come up in constructed, right? For example, right? You could have
what do you mean? What is this?
Standard, right?
Yeah.
Of course, we're not covering standard here, but let's say you had something like a Search for Ascanta or something in play,
I'm
right?
just unaware of it in general, Paul.
What is constructed?
Yes, what is constructed? How do you draft it?
Right.
No, totally though. That could be super relevant going down the line, and I would not be shocked to see Enter the God Eternal see some constructed play. It certainly is on par for power level. It's just what is it replacing, and
of course,
all those normal questions you get when you're trying to build a constructed deck. But in limited, not remotely close.
Oh,
anytime you can cast it, you will do so. And it looks like we have a fairly major trade of resources going on here. And once again, leaving Joe Soh after the dust settles in a commanding position.
Yeah, now there's the Opportunist as well. Paulo sitting at 6 life. So Joe can try to drain Paulo out here. And at this point, I mean, I don't think there's...
Is there any way to come
really
back?
any sequence of draws for Paulo to kind of come back.
Looks like he found Bond of Flourishing, but it is not enough. And Joe Soh, well done, my friend, emerges from an extremely tough pod here on day number 1 as our only 3-0. Now, Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa, no problem. A good 2-1 start. It's solid. It's not exactly what he wanted, but it's pretty darn close. But I have to say, if I'm Joe Soh, I'm like, we did it.
I mean, he went through the gauntlet, but not only that. I mean, not only was his deck powerful, but I just thought he played extremely well throughout the course of the 3 games. It was really impressive and just showing that, he deserved to be 3-0, honestly.
Agreed. Yeah. And, his rounds were not easy. He started off with Oliver Polak-Rotman.
Right.
Then he had to beat Shahar Shenhar after that, and now Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa as well. Yeah. All right, so what we've got now is Time Walk Magic lined up for you here with Luis Scott Vargas. It is game number 3 as we come into it. This was recorded previously, but we get to watch it now, and we do not know how this ends. But, again, this is the decider. We are going a little faster than normal to make sure that we can reach the conclusion of this game, and let's see what happens here for Luis. A good start for him. Ken Yukihiro, though, certainly a worthy opponent on the other side of the battlefield here, an MPL member and from Team Musashi. Has Tibalt's Rager to kick things off. But a good turn 3 play here. 4 mana spent from Luis Scott Vargas on Centaur Nurturer. And that'll kind of put a halt to the proceedings here.
It's a turn 4 Bioessence Hydra, though.
Indeed.
For Ken Yukihiro. So if he finds a Planeswalker next turn,
forget it.
This thing will get in for lots of damage. Oh, and he does. Look at this.
Oh, my goodness. Is that Kasmina?
That's a Kasmina. So not only that, it's also really hard to kill the Bioessence Hydra because it costs 2 more mana to actually remove it. So this is a 9/9 Trampler on turn 5 for Ken Yukihiro.
Wow, this is going to be extraordinarily difficult for Luis as well because his game plan is to get a bunch of small creatures that grow and overwhelm you. And that does not usually leave a lot of room for coming back if you do get behind, and he is well and truly behind here. Ken Yukihiro taking advantage of this rare. It looks a little finicky, but boy.
So Ken didn't attack there because he was afraid of giant growth. Luis had up Centaur Nurturer plus the Ceratok, but you have a 9/9 Trampler on the board.
Yep.
But if Luis had giant growth, he would have actually been able to deal with the Hydra.
Wow.
Oh, man. Ken is just...
He's just dominating now.
Like
yeah. Kasmina now has created the 2/2/2s and the loot off of each of them, making her one of the more powerful uncommons.
It's a Finale of Promise, too, in Ken's hand. He doesn't have any spells in Yard, but...
Wow.
He's got a lot of action in his deck.
Boy, this deck looks sweet from Ken Yukihiro, and that is what we expect from Ken, by the way. He goes deep.
Does Ken have another Planeswalker here to grow this Bioessence Hydra?
Right,
Not
that
it needs to
would
grow
be
more.
completely insane.
Right.
Right, that would be the sequence where you're just like, okay, what in the world? It looks like he's going to get in with the Rager and the Bioessence Hydra here. So the Rager's going to get pumped, and it's a huge hit here. Luis Scott Vargas taking, what, 9, 10, 11, 12 damage here? Boom. Ken Yukihiro establishing dominance on this board.
And Ajaya's greeting to deal with the 3/3 Ajani's Pridemate, but
that was the window that he had because after this, the Grateful Apparition can kind of start going off. And currently, that's exactly what's going to happen. The Apparition does trigger even when it hits Planeswalkers.
But Luis still just needs to find an answer for this 9/9 Trampler on the battlefield.
Yeah, and what can he have? I mean,
Right.
his best plan is to create a board big enough to put a multi-block on it.
Absolutely.
And he doesn't have that right now, right?
And Tybalt's Rager is also just kind of able to get in. He has the ability to pump it multiple times here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very annoying position here from Luis Scott Vargas' perspective. But if you're Ken Yukihiro, you're kind of loving life.
Yep.
And, of course, if he ever finds another Planeswalker, forget it. Right?
Oh, yeah,
That
for sure.
Hydra's going to get out of range of really anything.
Oh, wow, okay. And Ken Yukihiro using Finale of Promise to only use it on one spell because, of course, you can get an instant and a sorcery. However, Ken only has Jaya's Greeting in Yard. But he just wants to clear the way to get in for a safe attack with this Bioessence Hydra.
Yeah, also smart from Ken, just recognizing that one of the few ways that he can actually lose here is if that Apparition sort of gets out of hand. And that is not what's going to happen here because Ken says, I'm just going to kill it, knock it out of the sky, and knock you down to 4 life. Luis Scott Vargas. Ken Yukihiro looking to hand Luis a 1-2 out of this draft in a deck that looked pretty strong as well.
It's like, should I attack with my 9/9 Trample? Oh, okay.
Everything's in the red zone. Bang, bang, bang.
should do
Callous
it.
dismissal. Maybe callously dismissing Luis Scott Vargas as a 1-2 and a 2-1 finish for Ken. If he can finish this thing off, Luis is doing the math, but there's no way out. And that is Ken Yukihiro picking up the 2-1, and Luis is going to have to settle for, it has to be said, a disappointing 1-2 for him. Well, we've got a draft roundtable coming up for you to kind of recap the proceedings, but first, these messages.